You're listening to Two Beers Until Phronesis, a podcast where we discuss the ideas of philosophy, ethics, religion, history, and culture. Alongside regular guests and friends, we discuss some of life's big questions over a few beers. Enjoy. We'll see how this goes, but basically, there's this guy, Julian Baggini, and he wrote a book called Virtues of the Table, and it's been sitting next to my student cookbooks for several years now. So I thought, as a graduate, I should probably read it. And I thought it was a really good book. I've been talking to you guys a little bit about it, obviously. And it's basically this idea of combining or applying virtue ethics to how we think very broadly about food. And as an extension, because food is just this big thing that we're all engaging with constantly, life itself. And basically, he splits the book into 4 parts. So he's talking about what qualifies as good food, where does it come from, and what do we count as good food, whether it's ethical or healthy or whatever, and where have we kind of gone wrong with our thinking about this more broadly. And that's the part I want to talk about today. We'll see how that kind of goes. I originally thought, well, we'll just kind of avoid veganism and all those kind of very heavy discussions, but fuck it, let's just talk about it. And so virtue ethics is all about cultivating character as opposed to thinking about good or bad moral actions. So the classic moral theories like utilitarianism and deontology, they're like looking at either the intention or the outcome of the action. And rather than looking at actions, virtue ethics is a relatively recent thing, which I guess we can talk more about later. Virtue ethics is looking at what kind of person you are instead, because a lot of the classic moral theories run into problems when it comes with coming out with like very concrete rules. So this is kind of a way around that without just descending into complete relativism. But yeah, we can get more into that later. And then the other ones he talks about is like fasting and when not to eat. And the last part he talks about is eating in general. So taking the time to enjoy certain kinds of food and meal times and things. But we can talk about that in a separate podcast. At the moment, I just want to talk about kind of where good food comes from and what that fucking means. And I thought I'd get you guys on it because, so Kieran, you work with nutrition and stuff. And what do you do? What is it?
So I basically manage cases at a healthcare company. So part of my job is giving people advice on nutrition, setting up nutrition referrals for them, sort of identifying when they may have an issue with aspects of their life that relate to nutrition. So it's a big part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. And then I'm just interested in it in general, really, sort of for my own personal life and sports and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to say with the boxing, I guess like diet's a big part of that.
Yeah, and just general kind of lifestyle, really. Like I think over the last few years in particular, I've definitely learned a lot about just how profound an impact changing your diet and the things that you eat and the way you look at eating as well, not just what you eat, but how you see it, or how profound an effect that can have on you in many other ways than just kind of like how you look and how you perform physically. So yeah, that's basically the point in what this guy Julian Baggini is saying. And then so Sam, I think we've talked a lot in the past about certain ideas relating back to like self-control and autonomy. So I thought, yeah, you'd be interested in this. And then Zach, you work with cider, and I think that actually has like a lot of crossovers with this because he basically bangs on about what do we actually like about organic farming and getting stuff local or sustainable. Like, what does any of that mean? And isn't there just like a simpler way to think about this without just like falling into this trap of just making a billion checklists?
Yeah, and the big drive that we've seen, particularly over the last sort of 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's so many things to think about now. And like I'm not completely convinced, but I like the large majority of this stuff it's just such common sense. There's a few red pills as well. I thought it was a good book anyway. So first of all, I just wanted to ask, like, you guys, insofar as your relationship with food, would you describe yourself as foodies in any sense?
Foodie just means I like to eat lots of cake, doesn't it?
I'm a fucking foodie then.
Yeah, I guess, well, we're all consumers of food, but normally I guess it's a term that kind of covers aficionados of cooking and baking as well. So kind of makers as well as consumers of food. I cook things. I don't bake things. I'm not very scientific with how I kind of create meals, I'd say. But yeah, I guess, yeah, it's kind of a bit of a grey area defining being a foodie, but normally I'd say one has to sort of consume just about as much as they make, and maybe experience, foods from different cultures quite consistently as well.
So how would you define a foodie? Because I don't really know how to answer that. Because I've heard the term and I'm vaguely familiar with what a foodie is, but I guess just for clarity.
I don't know. I mean, I would say it's, in some senses, is actually quite a bit of a food snob. I think there's a fine line. I kind of talked about that when I was talking about like people who are really into ale, and it's actually quite a delicate balance, because once you start getting really into something, you end up saying stupid shit like there's only one way to cook a fish, and like really chastising other people for like making things differently. That's the problem.
It's the fucking Dunning-Kruger curve, though, isn't it? It's like as soon as you start to get a little bit into something, you're like, well, I know everything about, making coffee, and now I'm going to be an unbearable asshole about this until I realise, oh, actually, there's loads of ways to do it, and then I sort of chill out a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not a foodie by any stretch of the imagination. I enjoy food, but to be honest, since this book, I've never really thought about it. I've thought about the classic debates like veganism stuff, and I guess we'll get into our different takes on vegetarianism and stuff like that. So I've never really thought about like local or organic or any of that bollocks. I barely think about things like free range, which is really bad coming from somebody that studied philosophy. I've had like small gains in those areas because I used to work in catering, but I've never professed to like know much about it at all. Like I think like everyone, I'm trying to do my best in that area, but I've never really got to grips with it. And I think this book really helped with that. Yeah. So do you think that people think broadly about food in general?
Yes, and in lots of different ways, some good and some bad.
What do you mean by people think about food? Do people think about food? Yeah.
Do you think that people have a good sense of thinking of food in an intellectual context or an ethical context?
No.
Or even knowing, like, something we can actually measure, like knowing the nutritional benefits of food as well?
No, maybe not nutrition benefit. I think people know what they like, and they'll be like, oh, I like this nice food because of this or whatever. But yeah, I'm not sure many people think about the sort of science behind it and all that stuff. But
I think it depends like on which sort of axis of analysis you're looking at. So if we're talking about, do people en masse care about where their food comes from? Do they care about the kind of the ethics in behind their food's journey, where it's come from, what it took to produce it and put it on their plate? I would say no. I would say most people haven't got a fucking Scooby, and that most people don't want to have a Scooby. Whereas, like Sam said, I think there are probably a lot more people out there who care more about how the food makes them feel. So, i.e., chocolate cake is my favorite. I love it. I'm going to go out my way to get it. And when I get chocolate cake, I feel happy. And they probably do think about that. So maybe in that sense, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's like mood regulation rather than like, yeah.
Yeah.
Also quite selfish, if you ask me.
To get chocolate?
No. But it's just, I think to only look at it in the sense of I enjoy it and that's that, it can be quite selfish when you don't kind of consider the other aspects of enjoying food and the kind of sometimes the repercussions that can have.
Yeah, on your life in general.
On your life in general and how that will affect the lives of those around you, how that will affect, I don't want to get into the whole obesity thing now. I think maybe save that for later.
Obesity was at the front of my mind when you said that, yeah.
Because then that will in turn have a drain on healthcare resources, but also like the ethical reasons, like, if you don't give a shit about the fact that the meat that you're eating came from a slaughterhouse with horrendous conditions, then you are being selfish, whether you admit that or not.
Yeah, there's really no two ways around it, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I kind of mean by that, really, I guess.
Yeah. So the backdrop for this book, really, I mean, he opens by saying that there's been an overabundance of choice and like ease of access to all kinds of different foods. And that's actually made us value food a lot less. We're really, really frugal and we don't give a fuck about recipes half as much as we used to or availability of things. We just expect everything on a plate, literally. It's just this idea that paradoxically choice has made us actually think less about the choices we make. I largely agree with.
It's like choice paralysis, isn't it? Where it's like you've got so many options. I can't remember if it's in Fight Club or for some reason I'm fucking banging on about that book, but it's like he goes to like a crisp aisle and he gets freaked out by how many like hundreds of thousands of different crisp options he gets. So he just gets the same one that he gets every single time.
I don't remember that then.
Yeah. This is why I think he wants to talk about general virtues that apply to food, but also apply to the rest of life in general, because that reaction to choice is really kind of symptomatic of what's happening in so many other things in society. That sort of burying down and just like refusal to, answer difficult questions.
It's sort of like repression.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the abundance of choice and the abundance of food is something that we've only really seen within like the sort of last 100 years, I'd say, and predominantly in Western civilization, I would say as well. There's some parts of the world that obviously are still really struggling with availability of food. So it's only a select few nations, I would say, but it's brought a whole host of problems with it. And I think what you're talking about is the fact that people don't value it the same way anymore is massively a problem, which contributes to a whole host of physical, psychological problems.
Yeah, like you were saying, I think it's this idea of food used to have like a big place in the community as well. And now it's just become this weird, empty, fashionable thing, like people having sandwiches at lunch or whatever, and not really thinking much, unless it's to do with consumption. So like going to a nice restaurant or whatever.
I think we're living a lot more individualistic lifestyles and more career-focused, single-minded. This is kind of the cliche of sort of 9 till 5 role, grab and go, take a coffee and a sandwich on the run.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And we've got now apparently about 80,000 supermarkets in the United Kingdom. Fast food joint, takeaways, restaurants on pretty much every street corner in the country. And it's just, the nature, our brains crave fatty and sugary sources, high energy, but at what cost with, poor nutrition as well. And I'm not too surprised that things have changed in the last sort of 50 to 100 years. Ultimately, a lot of the infrastructure was set up post, the Industrial Revolution, sort of the canning processes, the thousands of items that could be made on a factory line has, led to the spike that you've seen today.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because when we look at and we were talking about this just before we got onto the podcast, really, about how many people in today's society are in a perpetual state of sort of stress or anxiety or whatever due to the sort of, the never-ending fucking sludge that is adulthood, in this day and age. And there's a very real response in your body when you're under a lot of stress, which your body produces cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And what happens when your body produces more cortisol is it can cause higher insulin levels. Because of that, your blood sugar will drop, and then you will crave those sugary and fatty foods that Zach was on about. So that's typically why we see people who are in high pressure jobs where they don't have a lot of time. There's kind of like 3 tick lists, really. 3 things on the tick list for somebody like that. Number 1, is it convenient? Because I'm in a stressful job, I've got hardly any time. Number 2, does it taste good? And number 3, does it fit my cravings? And like I said, from the science, we know that the proclivity is to reach for the sugary and fatty foods to sort of scratch that itch. And I think that's why we see so many people in this day and age going towards that food. It's that instant gratification, and there's a very real pressure from your body to give into it as well.
I think that says a lot about lifestyles in general. Yeah,
blind, aren't they? So it's like taste and craving, because it's kind of like your sense of taste only comes from the craving, really. And it's like once you stop, it's like the whole microbiome thing. If you stop eating loads of sugar, you don't crave sugar at all. That woman who got a poo transplant was someone who was like massively overweight, and then she came out of stomach surgery, had a poo transplant, and she was just like craving donuts, just craving like high sugar food.
Oh, what?
So when you have stomach surgery, you have to have like they basically wash out your stomach, so all of your microbiome. So you have a microbiome, it's like loads of bacteria in your stomach, and it controls basically your brain. So it sends out signals that can permeate the blood-brain barrier. And then this woman had stomach surgery. She had her stomach washed, and they basically take some poo and then they put it back inside, so your stomach and sort of colon can function. I don't think it was stomach surgery. I think it was colon, actually. And I think they got the poo samples mixed up with a woman who was like massively overweight, put in this like microbiome of just like all this bacteria that was just high sugar, like it fed off sugar. And she just came out of the surgery and just instantly addicted to sugar, just like came out and was just like hunting down Snickers, hunting down like donuts, like high sugar food.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like, again, the whole free will thing. We think we're choosing, I really crave a Snickers. It's like, well, you don't. You don't actually, you're not processing that thought. You're being told to do that.
Mm.
And then you're pretending that you have a thought about it.
Yeah, it's like, how in control really are you?
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's important to make the distinction between like refined sugar and natural sugar as well, because I think sugar gets demonized like quite regularly. It's like, if we're talking about refined sugar, like you said, in donuts and stuff like that, then absolutely, because the way that our body breaks it down is a completely different process. Whereas if you're eating, like, you've got natural forms of sugar, like even like in milk and cheese and stuff like that, there's natural forms of sugar.
Yeah.
And particularly like if you're eating fruit or something like that, it's a much better way to kind of get it into yourself, because it's digested a lot slower, and your body doesn't kind of have a total spaz attack when you eat it. So I think it's definitely addictive no matter what state it's in, but I think it's the refined sugars that seem to be a really big problem in today's society.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really see the problem in it, but it's like, well, given the fact that it can fucking harm you, it just seems like you're forgetting that Socratic question of, well, it's not just about living, it's about living well. And like, well, maybe it's not, because like, I think they think living well is immediate gratification, but it just seems like people have forgotten that, well, you don't need to satisfy every craving. That's not what living well means. Like, have patience or self-control. I get why that's really, really difficult. And I eat loads of fucking ice cream and shit. Like, just to say that, like, we all make nutritional mistakes. I certainly do, at least.
I wouldn't say that's a mistake, though. And again, I think we're on the cusp of a really lengthy discussion here, because like that's a whole nother beast. But
yeah, okay, I think I know where you're going with that.
Yeah, like it's fine to have stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's no single food that's bad. It's diets that are bad.
Yeah, and it's just the way I look at it. So when I try and explain this, because if people have heard previous podcasts, they'll know it's a lot of engineers that I deal with. It's British Gas. We provide the occupational health for, basically. So a lot of these guys have not got a Scooby about nutrition. They've never been taught to about it, and they don't particularly care about it. So I kind of have to break it down to them in a way that they can understand. You've got, the way I see it, three main components to nutrition. You've got nutrition for health. That includes physical health and psychological health. You've got nutrition for weight management. The reason I separate that is because that can also be for aesthetic reasons, not just kind of like health reasons. And that can be gaining weight as well. Like a bodybuilder may want to gain weight, or, somebody may want to lose weight if they're obese or whatever. And then you've also got nutrition for sports and physical performance. And again, I separate that because that's not the whole population. Not everybody is eating because they play a sport. Some people just eat because they need to eat. So you kind of have to look at each of them as its own beast, really. Because if we're going to have a conversation about what's healthy, there's lots of doors that we can open there. But if we want to talk about specifically nutrition for weight management, then it's actually a lot more simple than people think. And there's a lot of things that are sort of condemned that shouldn't be condemned if we're looking at it purely through the lens of weight management. So you like to eat ice cream, then that's your kind of thing. Grilling, what about you? Have you got any sort of like foods that you go to?
Any sort of guilty pleasures, I guess, would be, well, just garlic bread, really. In fact, I had some just for the podcast now. Although not a whole baguette, though. I only had half a baguette, and I might just have the other half later on.
Sick.
Sugars, natural as possible. So I normally just have fruit. When you look nutritionally at fruit per 100 grams, we're talking anything from sort of 10 to 15 grams of that product is sugar. Whereas you look at things like, chocolate, biscuits, we're talking a third to half of their content alone, particularly minimum cocoa solids, milk chocolate. Over half of that is just sugar. And I'd be very surprised if many people in this country actually knew that. If you ask them to name the primary ingredient of chocolate, I bet you most people wouldn't say sugar, but it is. It's milk chocolate. No, let's keep it fairly sort of healthy.
Yeah. What about Sam? I know you like to have a cheat day every now and again. What's your go-to?
Just fucking everything, mate. On the cheat day, just eat everything. Just eat children. Eat signposts.
Need more iron in your diet.
Yeah, probably just mince pies, actually.
Oh.
Nice.
Yeah. Just eat like 3 or 4 packs of mince pies.
In one sitting.
What, like not near Christmas? Just so I can eat mince pies?
Yeah, or like bakewell tarts. Like, I have like a cheat day where I just eat like some fucking cookies and shit. What I find quite cool about the cheat days is like psychological, because you have all this like instant gratification. You're like, yeah, I'm getting this treat. It's going to be so good. And you're like, oh, it's actually just feel exactly the same as before, which I think is like part of why people shouldn't just give in to like that instant gratification, because when you actually get the instant gratification, you're like, oh, it's kind of wank.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's not just about physical health. I think the physical health stuff links in over to mental health, and I think even broader than all those things, just the way we think in the most general terms. So one of the things that he identifies quite early on in the book is all this like syncretic, contradictory thinking that people have about like, well, nutrition would be one example where people think certain things are healthy and other things aren't, when that's clearly not true. One of the ones that sticks in my mind is like vegans not eating honey. Just doesn't seem to make any sense.
Right? Why not? Because it's an animal product, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the principle of being a vegan would be to limit the damage you're doing.
Oh, sorry. So vegans do eat honey?
No, vegans don't eat honey.
Yeah, cool. I was going to say, yeah, that makes sense. The vegans not eating honey makes sense, because it's like food for other animals.
Yeah, but it's not causing the animals suffering, which is...
Well, it is taking food away. It's like eating chicken eggs. I get it. I get how you could be like, well, it's like milking a cow. People think milking a cow is like some sort of process where you fucking put needles in its veins and like drain its bioessence. But it's just literally just putting some suction cups on a cow that is producing milk, and they don't drink milk. So I understand that.
The thing is with bees is that they need to have their honey, excess honey taken away. It's healthier for bees and bee populations.
I mean, same with cows. Like, they need to be milked.
Yeah. Well, I think that's another one. I think it gets a little bit. There obviously it depends what kind of farm you're going to. We'll get into that anyway. But I guess another one I'm thinking of is like people buying large free range eggs, because it's like large eggs generally they hurt the chicken's ass when they come out. So you're worried about buying free range, but then you go for the largest one. It just seems like quite a contradiction. Or people getting like half calf cappuccinos and stuff. So
no, skinny cappuccino. Richard Dawkins going insane about skinny cappuccino, which is
not Richard Dawkins. This fucking, what's his name? Conservative bloke.
Peter Hitchens.
Yeah, legend.
I'll link that in the show notes.
That's literally perfect, because he's going like, well, you say I'll have a skinny cappuccino with a caramel shot. So like not understanding the way that your body breaks down sugar and fat. So you're saying the thing that's it's like it is literally like free range, where you're saying the thing that sounds better because you're virtue signaling. I'm buying a free range egg because the chicken is outside for 2 hours and then brought inside for its like fucking Holocaust, like absolute life of hell, and then to like lay eggs. It's literally just virtue signaling.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
I think it is most of the time.
This is the problem that I have with a lot of kind of modern diets, I think particularly veganism as well. I mean, as Sam said, I think a lot of it falls into virtue signaling, but with veganism, I've had quite a few. So we've actually got, one of them's left the company now, but we had two vegan girls at my company, and both of them are really nice. So I could have like a...
Okay, and how did you know that? How did you know they were vegan?
Do you know what? I swear to God, I won't name her, but one of them didn't actually mention it. I swear to God, she's actually really chill about it. But the other one,
I mean, we believe you. It's possible.
Yeah, no, well, I don't know, mate. It's pretty rare.
I don't think it is though, because every single vegan, like 100% of vegans, has been like, just enjoying my vegan toast, and it's like, well, toast is vegan. Like, I don't say I would enjoy my fucking vegan glass of water and post a fucking photo to Instagram of me eat my vegan rice.
Yeah, I think both of them were chill about it, and it was some interesting conversations. But I think some of the things that I sort of posed to them was, when I got them to describe to me why they were a vegan, many of the examples that they gave me were like, wow, the conditions of this slaughterhouse, or battery hens and stuff like that. And it's okay. It's like, well, it sounds to me like much of your much of your kind of ethical reasonings for being vegan are predicated upon the meat industry and battery farming and stuff like that. It's like not all animal products are produced that way.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really non-intrusive ways, like you mentioned about kind of keeping on top of the honey that bees produced in order to help them, helping cows out, by actually sort of milking them safely and not in a distressing way. And, there's plenty of people that practice genuinely ethical means of extracting animal products. At that point, are you still completely against it? And I never really got a firm answer out of them on.
I have had a firm answer, and the firm answer that I've often got is, and don't get me wrong, I think veganism is, out of all of them, the most consistent and the best one. But they say, well, I have to just throw myself onto this label because I can't do it case by case because I haven't got the time or the resources, and the label's just easier. I know that there are inconsistencies in the way, and I don't know if that's exactly a cop-out. I think it's a good effort, really, compared to most people who, I guess, don't think about it at all. But I think sometimes you can just fall into these traps of thinking that these labels are consistent. They're just not. Sometimes they're unhelpful.
The problem with that is I would say I would need to see them making a meaningful contribution to actually rejecting some of the inaccurate vegan marketing and media that I've seen put out there. There's some real sort of guilt trippy stuff that's put out there that's just not representative of at all. They'll put stuff out there and it'll be like I said, like a picture of a cow in some awful conditions. It's like, okay, well, that's cherry picked. That is one example of how people keep cattle can be, and it's awful.
My favorite one is the cartoons of a woman put up to all the milking thing, and it's just right, a cow is not a woman, it's a bovine.
I thought I drew that in fucking private.
What, you wouldn't draw a woman chewing the cud, eating a load of grass for 4 hours straight and staring at the wall. It's a whole different situation. It's your attack's really misplaced. Speaking of which, another inconsistent food is, which I think is fucking ridiculous, is these weirdos that eat breast milk ice cream.
Excuse me.
Just jump in on veganism. Can I just get the fucking boot in on vegans? Because they're just oh yeah, we're all about saving the animals. So that's why we're on about cutting down fucking rainforest and then turning it into soybean farms and then covering those soybean farms with pesticides so that when it runs off into the river, it creates hypoxic dead zones that kills all the animals in that river. And then when we come to harvest that plant, we just get a massive combine harvester that just mows down all the animals that are in those fields.
Yeah.
So we make huge patches of the earth completely inhabitable for animal life.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So use that meat slurry to fuel the machines again for the next harvest.
Yeah, it's just so hypocritical. There is no good way to feed this many people. All sources of food, apart from maybe these things that they've sort of done with cell grown meats in labs, which looks crazy promising for the future. But it's there is no clean way to eat. There is no virtuous way. All food has a sort of dark side to it. It all has a waste product.
Yeah, I think you're right. So basically, the way he talks about veganism, obviously, I've mentioned before, he's a virtue ethicist. So he's going to say, obviously, the label veganism isn't entirely helpful because it doesn't successfully navigate the problem. The better way to think about it is to think about the virtue of compassion and use that virtue as a guide. So how compassionate is this farming and how compassionate is this particular farm? I know it's really difficult to apply that farm by farm, but it's more accurate than just
blanketing and labeling everyone as the same
blanket rule. The thing with the blanket rule is it just opens up so many different problems.
Connor, do you think this is death of God again? Because I think it is. I think veganism is just a replacement. I think it generally is a tribal replacement for religion.
I think it certainly can be because there's such a strong moral element. And actually, he talks about that. He talks about the sanctity of life, that it's this transcendental idea that vegans and vegetarians he goes after most, actually, because I think he quite likes vegans, and to be honest, so do I. It's just these moralistic statements that aren't quite right. Well, the problem is you're not in
my tribe.
There's no reason for a vegan to refuse unrequested food that's otherwise going to be wasted. If someone slaps meat in front of you, don't waste it. That's almost more unethical.
Yeah.
It's I know you want this blanket rule of religion almost, but if you really think about it, that won't help. That's why it's better to talk about compassion, because it's if you just think about it in terms of compassion, it's not compassionate to.
That takes hard work. It takes hard work to find out and think about what you believe, rather than just saying.
That's another virtue.
Rather than just saying I'm a vegan, and then using that as like a sort of replacement for having a personality or finding out about yourself.
Veganism itself doesn't actually do anything that most other people don't. Like, there's no fundamental difference between veganism and anything else, because it's saying that there's a sanctity of life, but that's not true, and no vegan would say there is, because we all kill bacteria.
Yeah,
we all kill insects.
Where does your definition of a life that matters end?
Yeah,
you can literally keep going with that right until you get down to amoeba and stuff, and it's like, does it only matter when it's a cute doggo that you're able to see clearly, or like do the others not matter? So yeah.
Well, there's a really interesting thing he talks about. It's like domestic cats. Just in the US alone, they kill billions of like birds and mammals every year, and it's like, by keeping a cat, it just because you feed it, it will still go out and do that. So it's like, by keeping cats, you are effectively doing that. It's like it's just
you're keeping a murderer that you know is a murderer.
Yeah.
A question I posed to these girls at my work, which they didn't really like give me an answer, was, given that one of the leading theories for why we have become as aware and as smart as we are today is that we unlocked the power of cooking meat and consuming cooked meat, which allowed us to trade intestinal length for brain efficiency and brain power. Would you say, and that, given that that is probably the only reason that you're able to be here today and be preaching to me about the fact that I shouldn't be eating animal products, would you say that that was a necessary evil? And they didn't really know how to respond to that. And I don't think they kind of like got the question, but it's like, if you look back at our history, like how we have evolved as a species, how we have kind of won the game of evolution, I guess, or been winning the game of evolution, should I say.
I'm much less sympathetic to that. It's like saying, well, we needed to kill each other, we needed religion. I think it's a different context now. And we have more means at our disposal than we did back then.
I think we're just so fucking weak that we're having arguments about this. Just as like a morally bereft and bankrupt fucking society, that one of our biggest arguments is about whether you should eat a steak or not.
No, I think that's the sign of progress. We're getting down to the shitty problems now.
No, it's fucking. No, it's not. No, it's so not. It's just, we're so mollycoddled that we're looking for massive problems in tiny problems. I don't care if someone eats nothing but lentils. That's cool. Please do that. That's fine. Like, there are bigger things in the world than like veganism versus eating meat, and the fact that people will find this as like a way to have a conflict is just like fucking grim.
I guess if it's your main thing is veganism. I guess I could see that.
A lot of people it is. Like there are people who's like their main thing, and it's like you go on Twitter and this isn't me. This is like I listened to fucking Bro Jogan. He was saying like there'd be like a fight between like vegan Lizzie number 6 versus like meat eater carnivore diet Barry, and it is just like watching like two and like they would both have the word vegan or carnivore diet in their Twitter handle, and it is. I get you. It's just like watching two like religious factions having a war. In the same way that like some people are more Christian than others, some people are like diehard vegans or like fucking meat eaters.
Yeah, I think I'd be a bit more sympathetic if it was a lot of people's sort of secondary or even tertiary goals, but for a lot of people to have it as their primary life goal, I do get that there are more important issues in the world right now, given the last few months, but also there's a far greater issue with food in that just a lot of it, meat or not, is wasted overall.
Yeah, massive. That's a huge crime.
I mean, there's about 6 million litres of kind of equivalent of food mass is wasted by households in the United Kingdom a year, and 1.9 million by the food industry itself.
No.
Yeah. So this is why he's bringing it back to virtues. This is why he's like, well, fuck the label veganism. It's not helpful. Fuck vegetarian. Just think in terms of compassion. So he's thinking about like pain and suffering. So just judge it. Go to an abattoir. Fucking take the time to learn how it's done, and then make decisions based on that. It's like there's no reason if you use pain or suffering more accurately, because pain is just the alarm response. He says like, well, you could prick somebody with a pin 100 times, but if they're an amnesiac, then it's just pain. But if you prick somebody who has memory, it suddenly becomes suffering. After like 10 minutes, you wouldn't be able to take any more of it. So it's like suffering is much more different. And it's like, you could even judge it by the animal then. Because it's like, a shrimp probably can't even feel pain. But there's no reason why a pig should be in pain at all when it's slaughtered. You could raise a pig compassionately, almost as a pet, and there are places that do. There are vegetarian farmers that have this exact mindset. I think you're right about the religion thing. They tar a whole industry with the same brush and think that the people that work in abattoirs don't understand animals or understand or have any sort of empathy with them. And it's like, it's actually the opposite.
My beef, if you forgive the fucking pun, is like they'll tar the industry without knowing anything about it. So it's like, I remember listening to Nye talk to someone about veganism, and they were like, oh, the way cows are kept are disgusting. And Nye's just got like cattle, and he's like, we treat those cows like amazingly. And I know that he's like actually like a fucking high-end farm compared to like some horrible Brazilian dingy thing. It's when people start mouthing off and tarring an entire industry without knowing anything about it. It's like when people mouth off about nature and they haven't even been in nature. Like they're just like, they've watched a David Attenborough documentary and think they fucking know everything about everything.
Yeah, so one of the things he goes into quite a lot of detail about is keeping an animal in captivity and thinking sort of, I think what a lot of people who are vegan end up doing is they project their human experiences onto an animal. So they would say like, being in a confined space is discomfort. It's like, well, for a cow during winter, it's really not.
Yeah.
They prefer the smaller space. Big field isn't always what's best for their health. It's small groups, big field. No, not at all. If you let them out in the field, it's way bad for them. They'll be stuck in this muddy shit. They'll hurt themselves. They'll be cold and uncomfortable. They don't like strong winds or rain. If you let goats out as well, they start eating fucking all kinds of poisonous nettles and stuff, and they need to be kept inside for their own good a lot of the time. And also the idea that like for some reason it's like better to milk a cow by hand. You get some buxom milkmaid on a fucking little stool in a little ye old pail.
It's because it's romanticized. It's the same.
Yeah,
it's the same. Oh, that bear's like Baloo. It's not. It's just a fucking biological killing machine that would just eat you.
I blame Disney films.
Yeah, legit. Like, I wouldn't even think about it.
There's also the idea, and I think this is inconsistent as well, of like when I don't really want to like just rip on vegetarians and vegans too much, because like I said, they are the ones. No, they are the ones thinking about it a lot more than most. It's just it's not the full hog. So, because they're the ones, the only people. I didn't realize that was a pun.
We've made like 4 amazing food puns.
But anyway, this idea that you have to kill something yourself, or you have to be willing to do it to eat it. It's like, well, no. You can be squeamish. It's like you don't have to be willing or able to do open heart surgery. Think that it's a good thing in principle.
I would say so. When I was younger, I used to go out. Hunting with my dad a lot. Obviously, we haven't got like a lot to hunt in the UK, so it's not quite as cool as hunting there. But I used to hunt like rabbits and stuff like that. I have shot deer.
Bastard.
You're hard.
I was all but this is the thing though, man. Like I was always taught to respect them and to not like. So one thing that Dad always taught me: if you can't kill it with one hit, don't shoot at all. Like if you don't think that you're going to kill it dead there and then, so it doesn't suffer, don't bother at all. It taught me to kind of be respectful of the fact that when you kill an animal, there's an awful lot of it that's there. So it teaches you to not waste, to actually try and think of uses for the whole body.
Sorry, just to clarify, were you eating these afterwards?
Oh yeah, 100%. The only things I've ever shot and not killed are pests that were having a effect on the kind of the ecosystem of my parents, like smallholding. So like rats that we weren't able to eat due to like problems with disease and stuff like that. So rats would come in and they would like literally gnaw the chicken's legs and stuff. Like it was really bad. So we had a really bad problem with rats at one point. So obviously they had to die so that we could look after our livestock, but we weren't able to eat them. Apart from that, every time I've killed something, I've eaten it.
Yeah, well, you're trying to preserve the quality of life and you're trying to minimize suffering.
Yeah, precisely.
Really weird thing to think about, actually. But I think we condemn hunting mainly for the psychology, not the impact that it has. Like, because potentially, if you think about it, it's a much swifter death than any other kind of death. Like you said, if you can shoot it in one clean shot. But it's like the only thing that's being added there is like our interference, our moral agency. If you think about how an animal would normally die, it'll either be ill or eaten. And both of those things are fucking horrible compared to that.
Yeah.
A rabbit certainly doesn't seem to be thinking about tomorrow. It's not making plans. So he actually exemplifies this with a really kind of weird story where a woman was walking along with a goat, and sounds like the start of a joke, but they're all like petting it, and it's fucking great, and it's just like grazing on grass, and then they string it up to kill it because they're like, well, we have to fucking eat this goat. And as it's being strung up, and the knife's too blunt, and so they're trying to kill it, and they can't, and then they let it go because they're like, well, this knife's going to be too blunt, let's not like hurt it too much before it dies. And after that moment, as soon as it's let down, it just carries on completely. It's like this idea that like animals aren't oblivious to this. It's like thinking that they're existentially worried, that they're worried about their own mortality. Like he goes to an abattoir and he's like, the pigs aren't worried because they don't know what's going to happen. You aren't robbing them of anything to kill them earlier in life than they would get to a later age. It's like, I don't know how I feel about that, but elements of that seem to check out for me. I think there's a huge moral ravine between sort of grisly trophy hunting of an endangered elephant and, like we were talking about in the Fortitude episode, like sustainably, and I think what's most importantly, reluctantly killing boar to preserve an ecosystem, or hunting for food. It's like these things are very different to trophy hunting. To tar them with all the same brush, it's like a good life and a clean end is the best thing that any life can hope for, but especially one that doesn't think about tomorrow. You know, it's the intention, I think, that we're judging, and it's what kind of person the trophy hunter is. So going back to virtue, and like what kind of society we allow to take shape through that. But yeah, no, I think that's a relatively nuanced view of hunting, and I hadn't really come across it before because normally I just hear shouting.
Yeah.
I would say so. Trophy hunting is one that's brought up a lot. There's actually not that many people out there in the hunting community, from what I've heard, who will hunt an animal and then let it go to waste afterwards. So the idea of trophy hunting is like, oh, they shot a buck, so like a male deer or whatever, and they put his head up on the wall, and it's like, well, usually when they do that, they do actually eat the rest of it. They will chop it up and cook it. You know, they'll consume the venison. There's not tons of examples from what I've seen. I'd say the majority of hunters do actually eat what they kill. Hunters are massively responsible for the vast majority of forestry management around the world. So a lot of kind of forests, particularly in the US, I know more about it in the US and Canada really because I kind of looked into it because I'm quite into a guy called Cameron Hanes.
Yeah, Cameron Hanes.
Yeah, Cameron Hanes, who's a bow hunter, and he's sick, and I kind of got into it through him. And just listening to kind of how he talks about like what a hunter's responsibility is. And like you said, it's about making sure that when you do kill an animal, you're taking what you need only, that it is meeting a swift end to minimize suffering, and that you're also consciously thinking about the environment that you're in. And if there's any way that you can act that may benefit it, i.e., taking part in culls and things. I mean, if you look at Forest of Dean, like what the wild boar do, they absolutely fuck up the forest, man. They turf it up, because they'll go looking for truffles and stuff. They cause so much damage to other living plants and things around them. So the cull is a way of kind of preserving that balance.
Yeah, and it's reluctant. It's not. People imagine it's this horrible, like malicious thing. It's like it could be further from the truth.
No,
I think hunters and people who deal with animals in those sort of contexts, they understand animals on a level that a lot of people with a more abstract idea of nature don't. And I think that's why they respect the animals, because they understand what an animal is. Animals don't have a sense of time. And this is a bit of a Red Bull. He says, we're scared that life is inevitably pointless. And vegetarianism attempts to cure this by telling us that animals also share in those exact same anxieties that we do. And we kind of want to say that, no, their life isn't pointless, that they have a sanctity of life.
That's fucking sick.
That's chucking like a weird religious idea, this weird, like he says, like a transcendent value onto animals. So we try and overcompensate by populating the world with these weird spiritual ideas. But that's assuming really that meat eating is just nihilism, and it isn't. It's not like harsh materialism. So there's a way to go between them. It's like, because I mean, vegetarianism without compassion, it's like buying battery hen eggs or intensively reared cow milk. It's worse than compassionately eating meat.
Have you seen all the research about, what plants can feel and stuff as well? And how plants talk? Like there's a lot of research coming out that like plants are a lot more conscious than we first believed, because it's a lot harder to see. It's like things like trees communicate and they can tell. There's a fucking banging book by Sam Harris's wife, who I do know the first name of, but I'm terribly sexist, so I'm just going to call her Sam Harris's wife. Yeah, it's Annika Harris. She talks about like panpsychism, and it's like, is a rock conscious? And then like, well, is a human conscious? What point does it become conscious? Does it jump like is there like a consciousness jump where suddenly it has enough neural circuitries to become conscious? And it's like, well, by that extent, like plants are conscious, so you're not being any more ethical by eating like a kumquat than you are by eating a deer.
Yeah, I mean, veganism is just a matter of degrees. Like I said, It's not a different principle. It's just you draw the line somewhere else. And like, I don't think that's enough to start screaming at people and judging. It's like we just have different lines.
100% agree. It was something I touched upon. If you guys can cast your mind back, I think it was the was it Spectating Nature and Observing Chaos episode?
Episode 5 or 6 or something.
Remember we did that one ages ago.
Yeah, that's because my dissertation was on it, animal ethics. Yeah, we did a shitty episode on it in series 1.
So what I talked about there, I don't know if you can remember, was that why do people see animals as different to plants? Like because I think I actually touched upon what you're talking about there, Sam, if I remember rightly, like the fact that we know that plants can exhibit a sort of pain response, and we know that they have ways of communicating with each other. So why does our sort of subjective view of what is valuable life and what isn't valuable life, why is that something that seems to be perpetuated by vegetarians and veganism? Why can we not just accept the fact that as humans, to eat, we in some way, shape or form need to exterminate another life, be that a plant, be that an animal, whatever. A life needs to end for us to eat. Why can we not just accept that, get on with it, have respect for the things around us, look after the plants, look after the animals, treat them with respect, and when it's time for us to eat, pick the most sensible way that minimizes suffering and damage to the surrounding environment to do so, i.e. not fucking killing 10 cows for like one family to eat and then throwing out half the fucking meat that goes to waste, but actually taking only what you need, rather than like fucking like totally fucking up like an entire patch of land when you don't really need it. Like Sam said, like a lot of things that are produced for vegans are massively detrimental to the environment. So realistically, they are making a choice there as well. They are kind of making a choice about how much destruction they are willing to make in order to fill their belly. And it's that sort of balance between chaos and order then, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, when you think about land use, vegetarianism is one of the worst things environmentally you can do, because there's so much land that you can't grow veg on. So like you'd have to rip up a lot more to feed the population if everyone just turned vegetarian. And it's like, also, if you're vegetarian, well, that means you're not fishing as well. So basically you just turn the whole fucking world into crop space. And you like, there are some places you can't do that on. You have to have cattle there, not crops, because the crops won't grow. So you really have to have a balanced diet. I think you can limit the amount of meat you have, and like I said, like go for things like free range, if so long as you are aware of what that means.
What does free range actually mean? Because it doesn't really mean anything.
There's a subjective grading of it.
Well,
yeah, it's like free range sounds good. It's like fair trade. It's like, oh, cool. Well, it's nice to know that all other fruit is dealt on an unfair trade basis.
There's like a quota that they have to meet, I think, with both fair trade and with free range. So there's ways that they grade it, and I can't remember the grading system because my mum was telling me about it ages ago. But basically, not all free ranges are equal. There are some places that proclaim to have free range, but basically the animals will be kept in a very certain amount of space, or maybe let outside for a very certain amount of time a day, and there'll be quite strict regulations. So I don't know the specifics of it, but all I know is that if you buy something with free range on, it doesn't mean that your chicken has been wandering free, fucking singing The Sound of Music with what's her face. Like it's not like that all the time.
Julie Garland.
Yeah, well, I've had a total fucking mental blank then. But you know what I mean. I think we idealize that.
What's weird is that some animals can't be free range because of the way they're bred. They have to be kept in a confined space, and unfortunately, because of the way we bred them, we actually have to bring food to them.
We ruin them, yeah, completely ruin them.
Yeah, it's like, do you just euthanize those, or what do you do there? And I think it becomes a lot muddier and a lot fucking harder.
Well, if we do, the first thing we should all do is euthanize the chihuahuas and euthanize sausage dogs and euthanize.
Yeah, again, one of those inconsistencies.
Yeah, the vegans like, I really love animal rights, and then they've got like one of those dogs with skin on its face that's like you're literally forcing an animal that's a higher sentient being to fucking live in constant suffering and pain because you think it looks so cute. It's like, well, cool, yeah, let's start by freeing your fucking dog of pain by not mutating a wolf so it looks like that, because that's horrible. Oh yeah, it's Julie Andrews, by the way. I just had a quick look. It's not Julie Garland.
Julie Garland.
Who the fuck is Julie Garland?
Can someone look this up? Because I don't.
Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. That's who Julie Garland is. Yeah.
Oh shit! Yeah, she is. She got fucking
right.
She got fed
yeah.
nothing but amphetamines and cigarettes for like 4 years. It's horrible.
Yeah, she wasn't free range in the end, was she?
Yeah, unsat, mate.
Another label that doesn't really make any sense is this whole idea of buying local.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that homegrown and local stuff obviously does increase the appreciation of food in general. If you know where something's grown, it's great, and it's that's common sense. But it is worth noting. But I think it's deeper than it's just close. It's the proximity, because it's more about the transparent sharing of knowledge. And he basically says it's about the virtue of interdependence. So that's the real appeal of allotments, because a lot of people sort of cultishly think, well, I have to grow everything myself and not talk to anyone. That would be the best way of doing food. I would grow everything in my fucking
That's
garden.
the fucking dream, mate. Not talking to anyone ever.
Like, at best, okay, I'll go down to the same street I live in, and that's somehow better than it. And like, if not, then I'll buy British, and that's probably better. It's like, well, that's not really true. That's not a continuum. It's not about being close to you. So he says, like, there's no need for a fisherman to start farming. There are certain places that like are better to do food than others. So if you bought local potatoes in London, that's a fucking stupid idea.
Sick.
Because the yields in Essex are shit. And that's the closest place you can get them. You're much better off actually getting them from proper potato country. Because this thing about green miles, it's like, well, green miles don't mean shit. Like, what you want is that you want them coming from the places with the most yield, and places that, like, a lot of places rely on exports as well. A lot of places rely on imports. It's not necessarily economically good. It's not an excuse for shit food as well. Like, if food's just shit, it's almost like this weird jingoistic, I won't say racism, but it's just like, oh, I've got to eat British food no matter what. It's like, well, you wouldn't have British tea, mate. Like, tea comes from a place that tea comes from because they're good at making tea. It's like, how far do you want to take that principle? You can't just like start building heat lamps and growing everything down the corner.
Yeah, exactly. English breakfast tea is not English breakfast tea. It's just something that we've basically marketed as. Yeah.
What's that noise?
Is it the quiet nature again?
I don't know. It's like weird scribbly noises. I think it's just the quality of your phone. But yeah,
Slam. He fucking got you.
So yeah, I think what he says the real appeal of this obsession with locality actually is, it's about a human level of interaction. He says like allotments are fucking great because
the story.
Yeah, it's the narrative, isn't it?
It's just a narrative,
and it's a way into food. It's like it's a mutual and social interdependence rather than just being totally in.
It's also a marketing tactic for selling shit food.
Yeah.
Like it's let's be honest, the main reason, like, it's like all these adverts where people are like, hey, we're really standing with you. And it's like, well no, you're a business. Your main reason is to make profit and make money. So like buying British is a good way of like making sure you have like a consumer base.
Let me put this one to you then. So I'm guessing we've all been camping here, and just bear with me because in my head this analogy makes sense. But I'm guessing we've all been camping.
Yeah,
we have. Yeah.
So when you go camping and you make your camping food in the evening, I don't know about you guys, but in the past I'd bring like a can of beans, maybe like some sausage, whatever, usual shit that I would eat at home anyway. When I go camping, I'm cooking it on some like shitty stove out in the middle of nowhere. It tastes twice as good. Now, I think partly that is because I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm really hungry because I've maybe been hiking all day. But I think a massive element of what as well is you're enjoying it because of the narrative. You're enjoying it because of the story that you followed, going out, camping out, I've cooked this myself and blah, blah, blah. I think it's the same thing with when you buy local. When you go to like a farm shop, a cute little farm shop out in the country, and you've seen where it's all grown and you see the tractor out in the fields and it's the idyllic little setting, you're buying into that story. So when you eat it, you'll be thinking about that. And I know for a fact that when I was younger, when we'd be having dinner sometimes, mum and dad would sort of proudly announce at the table, oh, that's Liz's sausages from down the road, they're from her, and explaining the story of where it came from. Which
Absolutely.
I think is nice, but I think that's massively where a lot of the enjoyment comes from. You're buying into a narrative a lot of the time.
Yeah, so he says that's actually about sharing and about being connected to something bigger than yourself. Because we're not connected to like faceless brands or like Heinz baked beans. But
I am
buying today from Coles.
Buying your own shit. Do you guys ever grow your own stuff? Have you ever like owned an allotment or anything, or like started growing your own herbs or anything?
Yeah, I've grown some spuddies before.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I have in the past.
So Kieran is just confessing about buying and growing drugs
on tape.
Yeah, so what do you guys grow?
Well, you can't fucking grow anything, but like, you're just like veg, like allotment shit, carrots. Back when we had a garden. But that's the problem. No one's got a fucking garden because like space is premium. So it's like, that would be really good if everyone could have a garden, but it's just like not physically possible.
I think it's possible to grow more than people think.
Yeah, I saw a really cool guy called what's he? I think he goes by the name of like the gangster gardener or something like that. He's basically a dude from
sounds really cool.
Yeah, is he
a superhero?
There's a lot of marketing behind it and stuff, but basically he's from Compton, I think, in Los Angeles. He's from a very urban area, and he basically teaches people in an urban environment how to grow vegetables, how to grow their own stuff in a confined amount of space. So he was like teaching people how to like use like drawers from like an old chest of drawers or whatever, an old cabinet, filling those with soil and then just putting them outside your back doorstep and using those as like beds to like grow potatoes in or whatever. And it worked as well. I thought it was really cool. So like there's ways around it. And
so the first person walks by and goes, sick, I'll have those.
Yeah, of course. Like, and I'm guessing it'd probably work better if you had like some sort of like private balcony or something like that. And there's a lot of people in London who have balcony gardens and stuff, though, from what I've seen, particularly in like the more affluent areas, I guess. But even in some of the poor areas, like I used to live in Brick Lane. My next door neighbours were Bangladeshi, and they used to grow like fucking like onions and stuff just out on the balcony, and it was a communal balcony that I'd like walk out on as well, and there'd just be like shit growing like just out on the ledges and stuff. So people can find a way, I guess. It's
pretty wholesome
when they want to. But Grillian really quietly said potatoes in the background while Sam was talking. So so what, you grow them yourself?
No, I have done before.
Oh, okay.
The soil's a bit of an issue as well. Sort of not only just sort of the space being at a premium, like something you mentioned, but also sort of the gradient of the garden, too much drainage, not enough. The soil type, is it sandy? Is it very clay based? And I've grown a couple of things before, not much. A few spuddies here and there.
But it's also more expensive as well, isn't it? It's like onions are like 30p.
Yeah, they're pretty cheap.
But it is like a hobby, but it's not a solution to food problems.
I think it depends. it depends on what you're growing.
It does depend. Yeah, I think
if you have a garden, you have space, you can actually grow some stuff, but it's just like you cannot do it on like an industrial level.
Yeah,
otherwise, like these, like it's like anything. It's like you opening a burger restaurant, like versus McDonald's. Like the amount that they can save because of the industrialization of the processes, like they can just do it so much cheaper.
But it depends on what you're growing. So there are some things that you can prioritize growing in the garden that you will not need as many of to make a filling meal. So obviously, if you like put a fucking load of cucumber seeds out in the little bit of land that you have, and all you've got is cucumbers, then yeah, you're going to starve, like, because there's not a lot to it. Whereas if you actually invest, like, you've got a small bit of land, it's like, okay, I'm going to grow sweet potatoes, and you grow some sweet potatoes, you've got a really, really nutritious source of carbohydrate there and then all you need to do is sort of pair that with meat. So like, and there's some vegetables out there that are like so expensive, dude. Like I'll never, like, probably one of the greatest periods in my life was when I was living in a hotter climate and I had avocado trees like locally, and I would just go and pick my own avocados. And it was amazing because we all know how expensive avocados are in this country. You pay an absolute fortune for them. And that was class. And all right, I realized that wasn't like on my bit of land. I know that was out and about, but when you've got the convenience of like being able to just go and get it, it definitely does help. And I think during the Second World War, there was the old dig for victory, wasn't there? And all right, I know there was a much smaller population back then, but when you think about it, like a lot of people, even people that didn't necessarily have like gardens and stuff, they were able to kind of help themselves out. Maybe not be self-sufficient, but
they could supplement
they were able to help
absolutely.
themselves along the way. And the ones that didn't were able to kind of like barter for stuff as well.
Yeah, I think it's not just about feeding stuff as well. I think it's actually, like I said, like an appreciation and a way of connecting with other people and a way of remembering that is what it takes to fucking grow things. So I was thinking about Western cider actually, Zach. I have a much closer connection with alcohol I drink if I've been to the brewery and I understand the brewing process, especially because Western cider is quite local to where I grew up. It feels like a part of the heritage there.
Yeah, if you're driving on the way there, you drive past a lot of the orchards as well. You are kind of seeing, again, it's the narrative, the start to finish process, wonderfulness of local and everything, all these sort of slogans that people do, not just for the sake of, marketing gimmicks, but people do physically experience on the day itself or just throughout their life. Yeah,
so like being appreciative and being connected is just a much better maxim. I know it's more vague, but I think that's what it needs, because just saying local it will not help anything. It won't help the economy, it won't help sustainability, it won't help your nutrition even. Like a lot of locally grown stuff is shit.
Yeah, my chicken comes from a mile down the road, but it's this new chlorinated stuff, by the way, but that doesn't matter because it's local.
I disagree. If you're speaking generally, then maybe. But if we talk about, like, look at an individual level, there's lots of places that produce local food. I would say the quality is noticeably better, because what you'll typically find with any kind of
certain foods,
and it again, it depends what you're getting. But also, like, so there's a farm shop just down the road from us. If everybody that went there today started just going and buying their stuff from Tesco instead, they go under, mate. That's a family there. So it might not be contributing to the kind of the wider economy as much, but there's still people that have set up a business. And all right, maybe we could argue that maybe they shouldn't have set up the business in the first place or whatever, but still, it's a business that's there that needs custom. And if they can provide a good quality service with good quality food at a competitive price, I get the benefit of helping out somebody I know that might actually be struggling compared to the big supermarkets that turn over a lot of money.
Connectivity. It's just not a good blanket rule, but it's I think local is generally good. I wouldn't disagree. It's just like, I think you have to think about why you like local in the first place.
Yeah, no, I agree. It
kind of leads on to organic, actually. I mean, do you have a decent definition of organic, Kieran? Because it can mean so many things. I mean, obviously, mostly it just means like free of pesticides, healthier, tastier, maybe less damaging to the environment.
So my understanding of like what the term organic would be not just food products, like agricultural products, because you get products that are organic that aren't actually meant as food. So like, all right, hemp oil is a bad example because you can use that in cooking, but do you know what I mean? There's stuff that is grown on farms that isn't actually
soap.
Food.
I think you can have organic soap, can't you?
Yeah, right, exactly. So organic it refers to the way that an agricultural thing, a product is grown and processed, typically without the use of like pesticides, GMOs, quite unnatural like petrol-based fertilizers, sewage sludge like fertilizers. I can't remember like all the different types, but yeah. So it's usually food that hasn't been grown without the interference of things that aren't really natural. It's typically organic food will have very, very basic, natural, good quality soil is typically the environment that it's grown in. And that is usually the same argument for why organic food is a superior product. I mean, I can go into that if you want, why having the good soils, seeing the better of the two.
Well, I'll say what Julian Baggini says, and then you can tell me if you agree. If you want.
I say he's gay and wrong.
So he basically sets up this dilemma that small-scale, wholesome farming is pretty much just a middle-class luxury.
Yeah, legit.
Yeah.
It's a hobby.
In some countries, like buying organic is basically resigning yourself to poverty. And some of the only places that are organic are these weird medieval towns that time forgot, and that organic maybe isn't the solution to the world's problems. But obviously the historic context for this is basically that farming was commercialized after the world wars because Europe could barely feed itself. There was this massive boom after that where people started adopting machines and sprays, and supermarkets obviously grew out of that in turn and undercut all the profits by doing what they do best and basically squeezing these farms by the balls. And then to counter that, and this is where organic comes in, farms have tried to stop selling to supermarkets and instead started to supply the local area and said that their stuff is organic and like return to that simpler, quainter time, which isn't as efficient, but it can be much more beneficial in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Most people cite health reasons rather than environmental or ethical for choosing organic. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about organic. And I think depending on who you ask, you get a different definition, as we discussed.
It depends on the country, really. There's different, kind of like free range, there's different sort of gradings for it, I guess. Like in the UK, we have Soil Association. There's quite a well-known certification for organic produce. And if you've got the Soil Association mark on something, you usually know it's a pretty high standard of organic. But like you said, it's kind of that trade-off between the amount people are capable of producing, because obviously when you're growing organic crops, they're a lot more susceptible to pests. They're a lot more susceptible to like various blights that could potentially reduce the yield. Whereas when you introduce like GMO, pesticides, and all the crazy, weird, and wonderful methods they use in non-organic growing, you eliminate a lot of that, and thereby you massively increase the yield. The problem is I guess it comes down to the argument of quality over quantity, because as you rightly pointed out, if you go back in the day, everything was organic. When you have food that has been absolutely hammered by pesticides, petrol-based fertilizers and stuff, what you'll often find is that the soil that they're grown in can degrade. Basically, the quality of the soil will be nowhere near as good, and the soil is actually where the produce gets its nutrients from, its minerals and everything.
I think the difficulty is though, because like obviously there are some pesticides and sprays that are very good, and it's not like the 80s when they were just spraying shit everywhere. Like it's expensive as well. I don't think they just spray willy-nilly. And I also think, isn't it true that organic stuff obviously does have a lot of chemicals and sprays anyway? It's just they're limited to certain
once
ones.
Again, it depends on where you are. Like some places and some even like from not just from country to country, but also from like company to company. I mean, there'll be some places that will pride themselves on using absolutely nothing like that, and they will use like very, very basic natural sort of pesticides. So quite a common one is using actual soap, like proper soap that uses fatty acids, mixing that with water and then using that as like a spray. It doesn't harm the plants at all. It doesn't harm the soil or anything like that, but it will typically kill things like aphids and stuff like that. So there are ways around it, sure.
Yeah, the main problem, as you pointed out, is so it's residual chemicals and stuff that's left in the soil.
Yeah.
Because obviously there are traces of everything everywhere, and I think people just have this superstition about that. The problem is the soil more than anything, or like actual harmful chemicals. But even then, like traces don't harm you. I think we've developed a very like over-cautious culture about it all.
Yeah, I don't know whether the evidence points towards like eating stuff that's been sprayed with pesticides will then, because people will say like pesticides are carcinogenic and stuff, and if you're eating the vegetables that are growing with it, you're increasing your risk of cancer. I don't know whether that's true or not. From what I've seen, I would say probably not. I'd say it sounds like a bit of a reach, but I would say the evidence that the general quality of soil when compared to like organic growing and non-organic growing, and when you actually if you're able to look at the nutritional quality of an organic piece of produce compared to one that isn't, you will typically find it does contain a lot more. There's a lot more that you're getting out of it. You can usually taste the difference as well. And I know people say that's psychological and it's marketing, but for me, it's really not. I've always grown up around organic food. Like my mum's an organic freak. She grows everything organic and she buys everything organic. So I'm really used to it. And I think you can taste the difference in some of the foods, and you can notice there's color difference as well. Like I know we're going away from like growing plants and vegetables and stuff now, but organic chicken eggs are a really good example. So if you feed chickens organic feed, the color of the yolk completely changes. It's a lot more vibrant. The eggs have got a much more, I don't know, they do just taste better when you're eating organic eggs. So I realized there's this premium aspect to it. And I think definitely, in California, Jesus Christ, organic food costs an absolute fortune. Like there's not many supermarkets that stock it. And when you do, you need to take out a fucking mortgage to buy it. It's atrocious. But if you can get past that, if you can get past the fact that it has been hijacked by marketing and people use it as an opportunity to kind of like as a resurgence of premium agricultural products, if you look at the bare bones of it, of which is better in terms of quality, I would say organic is definitely better in terms of quality from my own experience and also from what I've read about it too. But as someone pointed out earlier, we've got a lot of fucking mouths to feed. So are we going to get anal about quality over quantity when, if we switch to organic tomorrow, there's a likelihood that half the world's crops will be destroyed by pests and blight and stuff? And that's a lot of people going hungry, when we could control that by using like bioengineered genes and pesticides and things. So
yeah, I think you've got to take into account other things as well, like sustainability. Yeah. And there are some loopholes in organic as well. Like, so basically certain medicines to treat cattle would be classed as not organic. So you're actually, I don't know, it's just like organic doesn't solve all the problems. Yeah. I think you're right about a lot of the aesthetic things, and like a lot of these things are all sensible rules of thumb, but they're only ever rules of thumb. And I think that's just the main point he wants to make. It's just like rules of thumb aren't necessarily helpful.
No, I agree. There's pros and cons for both. 100% agree. Yeah.
He actually says that it's basically just a big fucking poo for economic demand. Like, not everybody can afford organic. I've only recently really had the luxury of thinking widely about like food choices. I've, as a poor student or being below the poverty line, coming from quite a low income family, like I never really could. But now that I sort of have that opportunity a lot more, I do think there's a slight cop out as well on my behalf, because I think there are ways you can be ethical within a budget as well, which I have tried to do. Like I've always limited the amount of meat I buy, in red meats especially. Like I don't know, do you guys have any rules at all about what kind of food you buy? Obviously, Kieran, you're big on organic, I guess. And
no, not necessarily. I'll let the other guys answer first, because I've been talking for a while.
Well, it comes back to sort of nutrition again for me, really. A lot of foods are synthesized up to a certain point. A lot of things are not 100% natural unless it comes out agreed. But it's trying to find that sort of intermediate. Does this have too much salt relative to its sort of volume or surface area? Too much, processed sugar, too much fats. And like I say, I'll binge on a treat here and now. Ethically, yeah, again, I don't want to know that it's come from somewhere where I could seek possible better alternatives, but I don't want to be too militant about the origins of it. If the logic is a false logic.
Oh, are you, Sam?
Yeah, organic's good, man. It's just fucking higher nutrients, tastes better. It's just like if you can do. That's basically it. So it's like if you have like an organic pepper versus like a normal pepper, it's just like normal pepper tastes like shit because it's just like all water. There's no fucking nutrients. And the way it's also been forced grown, so it's been grown on a quicker cycle. So it's been grown in like a lot of the times like they're just grown in like water baths, or they've just been grown like 3 times as fast. So it just hasn't actually had chance to sort of. First of all, it hasn't got any nutrients in the ground, but also it just hasn't had a chance to grow properly.
100%.
Yeah,
but there's no point getting like organic rice or some shit. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think it only makes sense with certain foods. I think it mostly makes sense with veg.
Yeah, well, veg. It's like I only do it with veg. So it's like I get like most
fruit and veg.
Organic veg. Don't get organic bananas. Don't get. I cannot afford organic beef. It's like fucking more expensive per pound than gold. And it's like chicken's fine, sardines are fucking sick. I literally eat like the same shit every day, so it's pretty sound.
I would say a general rule of thumb is that any food that you are eating to get the majority of like your sort of nutritional benefits. So when people like eat things like spinach, when people eat things, I mean, you mentioned pepper. So obviously a lot of vitamin C in the sweet peppers, a lot of antioxidants, like they're good to eat. So if you're going to be having that in your diet, it makes sense to have an accurate representation of what you think you're eating. Because if you're eating something that's lower quality, you may be thinking, oh yeah, I'm getting loads of that, when in reality you might not be getting as much as you think you are. Like
you just have solid chunks of water.
Yeah,
and it's like you can taste it when you go from like fucking organic fucking high Chinese social credit score fucking peppers to like fucking Auschwitz peppers. It's generally just fucking horrible.
You really can. And like I said, over the years, I've really, because something I've thought about was, am I just biased towards organic food? So I've really tried to like make an allowance for that by thinking like, I'm not going to judge stuff when I eat it. So I eat stuff that's made with pesticides a lot. I do, mainly because organic is quite expensive, as you said. The thing is, and this is the thing that I say to most people, is that if we all switch to eating organic tomorrow, it would probably be a lot cheaper. The only reason why it's expensive is because it's something that's not that not everybody buys into. Whereas if we all suddenly start...
all these things are dictated by markets.
But wouldn't demand go up, so therefore supply would drop, therefore they would have less to sell?
No, because I think precisely. If demand went up, then there would hopefully be more businesses opening that were able to supply it, because they would identify a big opportunity in the market. One would hope. I don't know. But no.
Because the thing isn't the problem in California, because there's so many fucking people there. It's like there's only so much food you can grow organically. Therefore, like, people are fighting over like organic quince.
So I used to go over. I mean, I say I drove. I wasn't driving them, but I used to go over to Modesto, which is near where my son lives, and it's kind of inland from San Francisco. And on the way there, some of the farms. You may have heard about like these big farms they have in America, particularly California. Jesus Christ, like proper battery farms just out in the middle of nowhere, and it is just like. Has anyone ever played Abe's Odyssey?
No.
No.
So it was a game for PlayStation 1, and it was basically this really dystopian game about this mega corporation abattoir. It's set on an alien planet. That's the only way I can sort of describe some of these farms that are like just out in the arse end of Cali. Is just like fucking big fields filled with metal containers with just cows just packed in all together, and it's fucking horrendous, mate.
The shit that they didn't want you to see feeding the populace.
Dude, the smell from it is fucking awful. Like, it's just, it really was quite... Like, don't get me wrong, what you said earlier, Connor, about like cows like being kept in like during the winter and stuff, I agree. I think sometimes we read way too much into that. But what I've seen in those places,
one's compassionate and one
exactly.
isn't, and that's
this was like well, I mean, Modesto is usually between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius on a normal day, and it's just and they're all crammed in together in that heat. That was fucking horrific, and that is unfortunately what America's answer has been to feeding their massive population. is to just make these big old mega farms, like not just of animals but of the vegetables as well, and you see it all being grown. It's fucking crazy, and it makes you wonder, like, could they ever switch to an only organic alternative? I don't think they could.
No, they couldn't. It's like we're just too big to speak. We're victims of our own success. Like, we're just overpopulating the world, and in the same way that if you get loads of rats on an island, everything dies. That's exactly what's happened with us as a species. We just
So this is what,
too many of us.
That's where coronavirus came in.
Well, I fucking wish, mate. That actually have helped out quite a lot. It would have helped out. It would have been shit for the people who lost people they loved, but like that would have helped out the planet, restore a bit more balance. That's why, like, all the people who own big business are like, oh fuck, we need to get off of this rock. Like everything is about getting to next planets.
This is actually something he talks about, and he says the virtue of stewardship is a more helpful way than just thinking purely in terms of organic or not organic. You might have heard stewardship mentioned in like Christian contexts. The idea that we're caretakers of the land, that it's not ours per se, it's something we have to inherit and then pass on, and sort of have the wisdom to know what to do with it in the time. So kind of like sustainability, but not sustainability at any cost, like you were saying about that cow farm, or just building like fuckloads of polytunnels in the Wye Valley or something just to make ends meet. But yeah, so kind of like sustainability with humility, and it's kind of an interesting idea. I think somewhere in there is the right way forward.
And that's kind of like that's the ideal, though, isn't it? But it's just not like it's not compatible with the real world. That's fine when you have, when you have like a medieval. I remember I talking about like how we used to like have the forest really well maintained, but that's because like however many people died in childbirth, like our child mortality rate was insane. So we just had so many less people, so many fucking brain. Yeah, we just had less people, and it's just like you look at companies now that are talking about. I think synthesized meat is probably one of the only fucking hopes we've got.
Yeah, I think that's part of this kind of idea.
Have you seen these people who are talking about like grinding up bugs for protein and shit? That's the level we're starting to get to.
Oh, mate,
bugs are so easy to harvest and farm, but it's starting to get genuinely quite dystopian as we like spiral into some
the day
crazy
after tomorrow.
What's that film by the guy who directed Parasite? The one that's set on the train, going through. Snowpiercer, yeah, that's literally that, though, isn't it? The protein blocks, when they find out what they are.
It's going to be. It's like protein blocks.
Just loads of cockroaches or whatever being ground up and put into like a little.
It's like the 40k thing of like recycled humans. It's like eventually the population will get to a point where we'll have to do something like that. The grown in lab meat looks fucking awesome because it's literally just cells. So there's not even an animal involved. It's just cells that they shock with electricity to grow. So that looks like.
It's due to peak at like 9 billion, isn't it? It's like supposedly in the next 50 years. The population.
7.5 billion at the moment.
Nuts, mate. It's actually nuts.
Do you know what else is going to happen in about 50 years' time? Well,
water shortage.
Sam's going to get laid.
We're going to. Nice.
I've got that day marked out on my calendar, mate. I've got a 2070 calendar.
Mine doesn't go that far.
10 minutes slot, and that's it. 10 minutes slot, then back to reading 40k books. That's it.
Yeah, apparently we're going to run out of topsoil in about 50 or 60 years' time. It takes about 1,000. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like we're depleting the soil crazy rate.
We've got 60 harvests left, and it takes apparently about 1,000 years to generate 3 inches of topsoil. So we're fucked either way, basically.
Wow.
Sick.
That's the most, in terms of stewardship, that's the thing that we probably should be on top of the most, I think, rather than any direct animal.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why the idea of stewardship is just a bit of a fucking meme, to be honest.
It's exactly the point.
Because it is just like, we should be laying off the land, but we're not, and we can't, so we shan't. So that
was a little rhyme there.
Animate fucking lyrical madness. That's what I do in between not getting laid.
our efforts would be much better focused on some real problems, such as, I mean, for one, like plastic pollution and stuff like that. But what Grillian just said about like topsoil and stuff, to me, that's pretty fucking spooky, man. Like,
yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, like that's very pressing.
Yeah, also global warming is still like a thing as well. It is ticking along, and like plastic pollution is not good. But yeah, that's what I mean about stewardship. Is just we have just been taking and just sort of like not thinking about what we're sort of leaving behind, and now we're sort of
So a good steward would find ways of trying to reverse that, because we've been thinking just in terms of sustainability at any cost and just like meeting demand, and it's like we need to think more laterally and think about ways around these problems rather than just fucking sticking more and more polytunnels up. Yeah. How are we doing with time? Shall I just do the last one now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So the last idea he talks about is seasonality, and he has this really weird virtue to get around this as to why we should sort of actually care about vegetables being seasonal and things, which is this idea of being kind of more connected with nature, but not just nature in like a woolly way, like, oh, you know, Mother Earth or anything, but like appreciating that there's actually this crazy flow of time that we never experience when we're stuck in an office, or like always stuck in rooms at like 28 Celsius, or like, you know, in the middle of cities when we're not around trees. Actually realizing that there's a push and pull of the earth that kind of comes and goes. So like there's obviously the environmental point about shipping out bananas. You can do that at low costs, that's fine, but then other vegetables and things you have to look case by case, because it starts to get really shitty if you start like shipping in strawberries and things. And there's also the case of like, well, what exactly is seasonal? Because like a lot of that stuff can change. But yeah, the main point is aesthetic as well. Like I think it's just kind of good to be a little bit more patient and to just think, well, for a start, vegetables that are out of season kind of taste shit. It's like, why am I in a rush to have like a worse version of something? Wouldn't it be better to just wait?
Agreed.
I need my fucking avocados in December.
Yeah, mate, I need my margarita with like pineapple and mango in fucking January. Like it's just ridiculous. It's just people doing it because they can, and because they don't actually appreciate the fact that sometimes it is just better to wait for these things, like you said. But I guess that comes down to more just like a craving for a certain type of food. Like, I only like this type of fruit. I want to eat it all year round. And if I have an option to do so, I will. Or looking at it with a bit more of a mature outlook, which is like, I actually enjoy this food, but I understand that certain times of the year, probably better to focus on eating this stuff instead and enjoying that whilst it's in its prime.
Goes back to what we were saying about like immediate gratifications, what people are seeking.
100%.
And also like gardens as well. Like people don't really understand what it means to have things in season. You realize just how short a window of time you have to experience some things. Like, I've just started growing flowers recently. It's like, oh shit, they only bloom for like 3 months, some of these things. And it's just like, just these small windows. You start to appreciate the flow of time itself just a lot more in doing that.
Wasn't that one of the first schools of Buddhism was all about gardening?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
And then I think it started out as gardening and then it evolved into life is suffering, which is
well, that got dark.
It's a fucking relatable transition. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, we're not affected by winter or spring anymore, and we just live in this like weird, bland Phantom Menace world made of CGI.
CGI Mace Windu avocado.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy to wait a few months for a seasonal fruit or vegetable to appear on the supermarket shelf. I mean, based on the fact I know that most fruit is water, sugar, and mainly vitamin C anyway, with the exception of a few. So I'm not really sold on the romanticism of just the design of a new fruit appearing on the shelf. I'll happily just compromise based on the fact that I feel lucky that I'm living, even despite this global pandemic, now and not, let's say, about 1,000 years ago, where I didn't know where my next meal was coming from, apart from pottage, maybe. 10 out of 10 would rate pottage.
Fucking amen.
Tasty wheat.
I don't know if you guys ever think about FairTrade.
That's, in a way, almost in a bad. It sounds bad, but I've almost kind of forgotten that was a thing when I see it on bananas and stuff. But yeah, it's always been put on the back burners, isn't it?
I don't know how I feel about the actual sticker fair trade on something, because I don't know whether it is actually genuinely making a difference or not. But I think
where's the money going?
I think what it claims to stand for, whether it does or don't, I haven't done any interest into fair trade. I haven't done any interest. I haven't done any research into fair trade, so I don't know how legitimate they are. But I think I think the premise that we should expect that people that sink their labor into producing something of value should be getting a fair wage. I appreciate in other countries their currency works differently, and it probably, when we compare it to what we earn, that doesn't always marry up. But at least they should be able to earn a salary that allows them to support their family, that allows them to kind of do something that's actually representative of the amount of labor that they've put into it. So I agree with that, definitely.
Yeah, the difficulty is obviously we have the chance to buy fair trade all the time, and most of us don't. And are we complicit in like a very exploitative economy? Yeah. I do agree with him in the sense that I think history will come to judge this sort of time and what we did quite harshly. But yeah, I really need to look into fair trade a lot more and figure out ways. It's a fucking minefield, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's like all the choices you can make.
I think on like a note, and I guess I was like planning to talk a little bit more on like nutrition than I thought. But one thing I will say to people is that it's really important to not fucking stress yourself out about all of this stuff. I mean, yes, okay, educate yourself on like the benefits of eating organic versus non-organic, and but educate yourself on this and that. Everything that we've discussed in this podcast are definitely things people should be thinking about and considering. But if it gets to the point where you're really stressing out about it, it's probably going to have a much more detrimental effect on your life and the lives of those around you than if you just chilled out and just said, I don't understand that, so I'm just going to eat this and see how I feel. Like eating stuff that has pesticides on it or eating stuff on it that isn't fair trade, it's not going to kill you if you're able to sit down and have that time to figure out what works for you and what you agree with and what you disagree with, then great. But I think a big thing that we need to focus on as a society is just kind of bringing the stress down and focus on sorting ourselves out first before we try and fix the world. So kind of the whole setting your house in order. Do you know what I mean? Like, because if I've got somebody on the phone to me who's saying, oh, I was having a mare last night, I couldn't find any fair trade bananas, and then like I love bananas and I wasn't able to have them, and then I got really stressed, like, well, just eat the fucking bananas, like get what you can. If it's going to cause you a meltdown, if you're like, if it's going to start causing issues with your eating, don't let it get to that point. So I think we're quite privileged in the sense that we can sit on this podcast, we can use critical thinking, and we can dissect these things in a relatively logical way. But not everyone's going to be able to do that and marry that up with a lifestyle that's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, the pursuit of a good life, philosophy in itself, is a privilege. There's no mistake about it. This is why I mentioned class so much. And I think this guy's relatively middle class. I mean, there was a comment about like he compares like sex workers, soldiers that get shot at, and people that clean toilets in like one sentence. That stuck out to me. I was like, right, you've obviously never cleaned a toilet in your life.
I have been shot at and sexually assaulted whilst cleaning a toilet.
I don't know, mate. Try working at Euro garages.
It's just like they're not equivocal. It's like a paid cleaner, like. If somebody with a profession, like it is a profession to be a cleaner, like it's not. And I do think there's elements that transcend class. Self-care, I don't think is a class. It's just like what you're on about, like the most basic stuff. I think anyone can do, but when it starts to come to like the effect you can have through your consumption and stuff, I think that's where it starts to get very fucking difficult. Because it's obviously a question of money. But like developing virtues, I think everybody can do, and part of that self-care is cultivating this kind of like wisdom or phronesis, or I said the fucking golden word.
Have you seen all this stuff about learned helplessness and self-hatred, and about how that affects diet choice? People who are like below the poverty line, having really shit time, have a hard life, there's a thing called like learned helplessness, which is basically like, I deserve the life that I have. I'm a piece of shit. The situation is around me and this is what I deserve. Therefore, I will go out and smoke cigarettes and eat loads of sugar and live off nothing but Haribo and drink loads of Coke because that's what I deserve. Having vegetables and stuff is actually in a lot of cases cheaper. So it's not like it's not a budget thing. It's not. I think that's like a sort of myth that it's like, oh yeah, well, it's just because I can't afford the good food. It's like, no, you could. Vegetables are cheap as fuck. You could live a really healthy vegetarian lifestyle. But I think part of it is the fact that you don't believe that you don't have the level of self-respect, or you think that you deserve to be treated like a piece of shit, therefore you eat terribly.
Yeah, it honestly is all one package.
Yeah,
and I think it really is just more helpful rather than just getting lost in like endless minefields of, oh, should I get organic? Should I get this? It's just much easier to be like, I'm going to try and work on myself as a person and reflect that in the choices I make. And just realizing as well that you won't have all the answers straight away. Like you were saying, Kieran, he actually has a really, really good quote. I fucking love this quote. I read this like an hour before the podcast. He says, the moral life is lived in a state of bewildered inquiry between conviction and apathy. So the idea that you should be morally serious but skeptical about moral certainty. It's like every time you think you know the answer, you're probably wrong, but you still got to keep trying to like ask questions. And it's just like you're never going to be right.
No,
but that doesn't mean that you can't just keep thinking. And I fucking love that.
Yeah, that's really cool. There was an example I was going to bring up earlier that kind of ties into that, which I think when we were talking about diets earlier, I think there's a lot of dogmatism in the world of nutrition and stuff, and like people will latch onto something and refuse to like look beyond it. The first example that we know of a low carb diet was actually introduced around the 1860s. And it was basically a geezer called William Banting, and he worked as an undertaker. So like, you know, he's around embalming fluid and shit, so he's probably batshit. And he basically thought that, he wrote a letter which is called A Letter on Corpulence, addressed to the public. For those who don't know what corpulence is, it's basically just the state of being obese, of being fat. And he wrote in this letter, because he'd had a lot of success with the low carb diet, and he wrote in this letter, it would afford me infinite pleasure and satisfaction to name the author of my redemption from the calamity, as he is the only one that I have been able to find, and my search has not been sparing, who seems thoroughly up in the question. But such publicity might be construed improperly, and I have therefore only to offer my personal experience as the stepping stone to public investigation, and to proceed with my narrative of facts, earnestly hoping the reader will patiently peruse and thoughtfully consider it, with forbearance for any fault or style or diction, and for any seeming presumption in publishing it. So basically, what he's saying in that is that I found something that worked for me, and it was really good, but I'm not claiming that it's amazing and it's going to work for everyone. I've observed it, and I've questioned whether the results are repeatable, not just for myself, but others as well, and use this to kind of learn. And that's something that's absolutely crucial to note, and one that I feel that many people, not just in the world of nutrition, but just in general, are quick to forget. Just because you've learned something and you like it and it's cool and it makes sense and it's good and there's a lot of things that back it up, keep asking questions. Like the first thing I do when I learn something good, I will instantly do research into the polar opposite of that idea. So if I've found something that I like, I will do everything I can to dig up every bit of evidence against it. And then I'll look at the arguments for and against, and I'll figure out where I sit between the two. And that gives me a bit of comfort that I've made some effort to come up with a balanced view.
That's actually a very good thing to do. And I don't think a lot of people ever do that. They just continually try and support their own sort of echo chamber belief, really, and hold on to one small sort of slight truth.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there.
And I'm not perfect at it, and I know I get it wrong, and we all get it wrong, because ultimately we all have biases. And I know that to a degree, even when I do that, my bias will probably still take over. But I feel like if I don't at least try...
You're giving yourself a chance.
Yeah, I'm giving myself a chance at least. And I don't know whether that is a legitimate chance or whether I will just constantly come to the same conclusion, because there's no such thing as free will and blah, blah, blah. Like, I get that.
Yeah, probably the second one.
Yeah, no, but at least I kind of eliminate the anxiety that I haven't tried. At least I know then that, okay, I've looked at both and I've given myself the best shot of having a moment of clarity. Whatever happens will happen. Okay, my bias is going to take over, great, but maybe my opinion on it will change. And maybe that was my bias all along, was that would result in my opinion changing. But I don't know, I just feel like it works for me, and I feel a lot more satisfied afterwards as well.
Answers are never simple anyway. I think if you feel like you've got a very simple answer and you're incredibly certain with that, you're probably wrong. And I think it's just good to be okay with that and to just relax into that and just be like, answers aren't easy. So just don't stress about it and just keep revisiting the question.
I saw a great debate or conversation, whatever you want to call it, between it was in a few parts, and you guys might have seen it, between Paul Jeterson and Ham Saris. Sorry, Jordan Peterson and Ham Saris, where basically they're debating like religion and God and stuff like that. And in one of the videos in particular, like Sam is quite condescending to Jordan. And
I fucking love it when Sam Harris gets condescending.
He's catty, isn't he? And he's funny.
He's actually like a little fucking bitch, mate. It's so sick.
But ultimately, he's doing the exact same thing you were just talking about, Connor, because basically Jordan's answer is quite long. We all know what Jordan Peterson's like. There's a lot of word salad. That's just how he explains things. And Sam's basically, his argument that Jordan's wrong is predicated upon the fact that Jordan's taken a long time to explain it. And at one point, Sam says, here's an answer for you. Very probably not. And he gives them 3 words and everyone claps and laughs and whatever. But it's like you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, just because someone's giving a long answer and is trying to think about something a bit more critically doesn't mean that they're wrong. Like, and just because you're giving an answer that's really easy to explain and succinct, like it doesn't mean that you're right. So
yeah, you're 100% right there. Yeah, I actually think if you give answers that are too simplistic, they're not accurate. I think the devil's in the details. I think especially when you're talking about religion and God and things.
3-word counterpunch.
You can't just say things like, I think we were saying the other day, like, do you believe in God? Or like, God is a lie. It's like, well, what do you mean? Like, you have to explain what you mean. You have to explain how you came to this idea. Like, that's the thing with those debates. They just got really sort of pop culture-y and like, it just became like who can look the best. It was just like, it was like a political debate.
Yeah, they're fucking those debates, and the one against Zizek is just like the most postmodern thing you've ever seen. It's like a weird, like fucking MMA smackdown. Like, yeah, it's just the fact that those things happen is just so strange.
It's the antithesis of philosophy.
It's my title quite nicely, actually. One of you lads might know which philosopher or prominent figure said a debate is not necessarily something you should win, but something you should learn from. Do we know who said that?
Socrates.
Is it me?
Yes, it's a good
I think it was me. I said that in the last.
Shit, mate, it might actually been you. I think it was.
Oh, Connor, did you just get quoted for the first time? Oh, bless him.
Hall of Fame now.
I don't know how to feel.
It's a good fucking quote.
That's an Xbox trophy right there.
I feel really embarrassed.
It's a good quote as well. It's a good quote.
It's a good quote. I like that, man. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
So I was going to say, that's why those YouTube videos were like, Jordan Peterson eats a boy. And it's just like, well, and then it's just like a really calm video of him explaining what Dostoevsky thought.
Well, it's like, clickbait. It's clickbait, isn't it?
How are you getting that out of that?
It's
absolute clickbait.
Yeah.
Because I clicked in it because I wanted to see Jordan Peterson eat a boy.
Anyway, if you feel bad about debates, you don't know what to think, just remember that Immanuel Kant died eating cheese sandwiches.
What's up, guys? It's me, Cool Sam.
Crank up the volume.
Did you just turn up your headphone volume?